Hey, what's up, everybody? Steve Schwartz here from LSAT Unplugged, joining you today to address one of the biggest issues I see students facing in LSAT logical reasoning: failing to distinguish between necessary assumption questions and sufficient assumption questions. This is incredibly important because necessary assumption questions are one of the most common types on LSAT logical reasoning, along with inference questions and flaw questions. Now, it can be difficult to tell the difference between necessary assumption and sufficient assumption because, of course, they both use the word assumption. In fact, some LSAT prep companies, I won't name names here, but some of them simply lump them together under the catch-all category of assumption questions, which is, of course, a huge mistake because these question types require radically different approaches. Necessary assumption questions should be properly viewed as falling within the category of inference questions because the correct answer is actually not new information. If you are taking everything in the stimulus as given, you are logically committed to agreeing with all underlying necessary assumptions. In contrast, sufficient assumption questions open up the door to new information, asking you which one of the following, if true, would guarantee the argument 100%, leaving no ambiguity at all. So let's start off by distinguishing between the two types based on wording in the question stem. Necessary assumption questions contain words and phrases synonymous with necessity, like depends upon, requires, and assumes. Sufficient assumption questions, on the other hand, contain words and phrases synonymous with sufficiency, like allows, enables, follows logically if assumed, and properly inferred if assumed. That's how you tell the difference. Now back to necessary assumption. How do we solve these questions? Well, as I said, because they are not opening the door to new information, but rather they are required by the stimulus, this is why the so-called negation or denial test works. You simply go through all 5 answer choices, negating each one, and the correct answer choice, when negated, will destroy the argument, leaving no ambiguity at all. Again, because the argument required that necessary assumption to be true. Now, we want to gravitate towards more moderate language for this question type because more moderate language is more likely to have been supported by or required by the stimulus than more extreme information would. So, for example, if you want to buy a $1 item, it needs to be the case that you have the value of at least 1 penny. Having the value of a penny is necessary to buy a $1 item, but is not sufficient to do so. On the flip side, having $1 million would be sufficient to buy a $1 item, but would not be required to do so. Which brings us to sufficient assumption questions. How do you approach these? As I said earlier, sufficient assumption questions open the door to new information. Doesn't matter how extreme it is, as long as it gets the job done. Like having $1 million to buy a $1 item, it's certainly overkill, but it will achieve that objective. Now, the correct answer for sufficient assumption should be viewed as opening the door to new information. So if we have the evidence in the stimulus, aka the premise, and we add the sufficient assumption as new information, the premise plus the assumption will be together guaranteeing the conclusion. The sufficient assumption is a missing piece that, when combined with the evidence, guarantees the conclusion. You will often want to diagram for sufficient assumption questions, at least when you're getting started, because they are oftentimes more formal logic based than are other question types. In fact, I have a lesson here on the YouTube channel going super in depth on how to approach sufficient assumption questions based on these formulas. I will link it below this video. And if you haven't already, please feel free to check out the links below this video to find out more about working with me and to book a call with me and my team. We'd love to help you out. We have a wide variety of ways we can support you, whether it's through our live online classes via Zoom, on-demand video courses, small group coaching, and one-on-one coaching to help you get that 170 plus LSAT score if that's what you are looking to achieve. So as I said, there are a variety of different formulas you can use for sufficient assumption questions. I'll get into it more in that other lesson linked below the video, but in quick summary here, what you want to do is look for multiple conditional statements laid out in the stimulus. Maybe you'll have an evidence conditional and a conclusion conditional. And based on those two pieces of information, you can propose new information in the form of a conditional that, when combined with the evidence, would be sufficient to guarantee the conclusion, leaving no ambiguity at all. Other sufficient assumption questions may not ask for you to diagram. They may not prompt you to diagram, but rather you would simply be looking for a broader, more generalized version of the argument itself, kind of fitting over it like a glove in the form of a general principle. Of course, if the generalized version is true, then the specific version is true as well. Anyway, folks, that's all for now. I hope you found the video helpful. If you did, please do me a favor and share it with someone who needs to see it. I don't do any advertising for this channel. I rely only on word of mouth to help get the word out, and your sharing this video does make a big difference. In the meantime, I wish you all the best.